Okay, so today we're going to talk about using technology with younger foreign language learners. And again, a lot of this applies to older foreign language learners as well, because what we want above all is appropriate implementation and development of resources. And you read that article regarding what we would call DATU. And those principles of really trying to figure out what is appropriate for the level of learning, especially in a foreign language because we're adding that other element of a second method of expression, those are really important for us to think about while we are employing technology in our classrooms. And I like what the textbook says about bringing language to life because technology really can provide us with resources from around the world that we can share with students. So, if you were a teacher, when I first started out, when I would go to France or another francophone country, I would have to ask for menus to take home or posters or ask if I could have various things and tell them I was a teacher so I could show them in my classroom because all we had were the very concrete materials. But now I can use my internet resources and my Web 2.0 resources to really share that world in a much bigger way with my students. And when I say a bigger way, that means really that I have so many more resources, but also different ways of demonstrating those materials. And we're going to talk about what that might mean as far as videos or Web 2.0, things like that. And we have to realize now that technology utilized in the classroom in an appropriate and effective way, in a thoughtful way, raises interest and motivation for digital age children. And you guys have the advantage of being part of that digital age, although you're not children anymore. For most of your life, you've been surrounded by these usages of technology. And this cartoon, I think, is great because every language has a certain specific texting usage, and sometimes we can understand that and sometimes we don't, but it's a different language that we have to learn. But these are things that change in society, and children in this day and age are used to being around technology all the time. For example, my nieces, who are in fourth and second grade respectively, use PowerPoints in their classroom. They create PowerPoints and present them. They use Twitter. They use Facebook. They both have iPods and are about to get phones. So these things are real in these children's lives. So what are some basic considerations when we implement technology? And these are broad across all educational disciplines. Teacher use versus student use. So first of all, you need to be comfortable with using technology. And if you're not comfortable with that, that's a goal that maybe you should set for yourself for self-development, or if you have opportunities for professional development. If you are comfortable with that, maybe advocate for it in your school to learn how to use these things in your school, or maybe advocate for resources. And you need also teacher dedication to implement it because we're going to see, it really takes some pre-activity, during activity, and post-activity structure to really follow through with these technology implementations. Also to consider the available resources that you have. So if we look at page 412, and we are skipping ahead a little bit here in the book, but I think it's important. And 412 and 413, what are the available resources that you have? So here you have a lot of technology-based projects and activities, some that require a little bit more technological savvy on your part and the student's part, and a few more resources, but some that are pretty basic. For example, we can go really basic. Let's say you have a computer at home, whether it's a laptop or not, or you have access to a library or a school computer, and you can go in and print out pages of a very culturally specific print that students can color, and you can talk about colors using that. And then we move up here to podcasts, listening to podcasts, making their own podcast or vodcast, which is a video cast, things like that, video conference calls over Skype with students in another country. Those of you who are working with students in countries that have different time zones or that's a consideration. But you can see that we can get very specific and very high level with our resources, but we can also scale those back to find ways to use technology to enhance our training of our students. We also need to think about guidelines. First of all, safety. We've heard about internet predators, and above all, we have to remember that no matter how much working on the internet and posting things to the internet can help our students and increase their motivation and interest, there are those kinds of dangers out there. So we really have to be careful about that. We also have school guidelines, and those are going to be handed down on the national, state, and district, and then school specific levels. So you really have to carefully consult all of those. Even at the university level, there are legal concerns that you would need to consult to make sure that your students could effectively use these kinds of technologies, especially if it's Web 2.0. For example, in my French 1001 classes, students are blogging on the web, and it's public, it's open, anybody on the web can see it. But I had to carefully check with the legal considerations at VSU to make sure that that was okay. I also was able to contact the hosting website and ask them, how can I prevent people that I do not approve from posting on the site? So therefore, I can see whatever is coming into the site. So there are things that are mandated, but there are also things that you can do. And then we also have to consider that students in our classes are going to come from many different cultures. Some cultures do not allow photographing. So that takes out any kind of photographing or videos that you do in your class. So you have to consider the cultural aspects of each student in your class and get parental guidance from that as well. And then, as we saw in the article and that you've worked through in your homework, you've seen this idea of developmentally appropriate technology usage. So what tools am I using and how is it appropriate for this level of learning, for this level of development, like the Piaget levels that we talked about the other week. So we have to make sure that it's actually appropriate for the development of that child. And your book does talk about this idea of 21st century skills, and we also are hearing a lot about the STEM initiatives, science, technology, engineering, and math. So it is very important to not just assume that technology is too advanced for students in kindergarten or your students at Head Start. These students need to be around technology as much as they can. They need to have access to it. They need to see how this works because it is something that's going to be essential in their lives, not just for their social development, but also for their learning environments and their professional development later on. But our main question here when we implement technology is, does it enhance learning? Overall, we have to ask ourselves, is this just something cool that I'm putting in my class? Or does it really pull in different things from the web or from a software resource or from a video resource that I wouldn't have been able to show my students something from if I hadn't used it? Does it really help my students? And I can tell you from my own research and from all of the established research that if it doesn't actually have a very visible and clear purpose in your classroom, students will not be engaged and they will not appreciate what you're doing. And when that happens, you're losing some of the learning factor there. So what are our guidelines when we start to implement things with technology in the classroom? Montgomery suggests considering the following questions. First of all, purpose, like we just talked about. Does it enhance the lesson? Second of all, the task. Does it develop our foreign language competencies? Is it DATU? Do the students have enough time to do it? Because a lot of times you might be working in a school, especially your Head Start school, where students aren't going to be able to go home and do homework on their computer at home, right? They're not going to have computers at home, or they may not have anybody to guide them to use it at home afterwards. So you have to plan and see what the demographics are of your classroom. So the task is very much related to the purpose. And again, the tools. Do you have the tools in your classroom? Are they readily available, or are you going to have to be scrambling around to get them? Are students going to have to be scrambling around to get them at home? Are they appropriate for usage? For example, you wouldn't ask someone in the Head Start Center, a student there, to use Microsoft Word, but maybe they could use a touch screen while you're in the classroom with them in a group. And then your process. Have you sat down and thought about every possible step and complication that could arise? Because when we start to use an activity with technology, one of the things that we have to think about is a really structured plan. So we start off thinking, why am I using this? And then every single step that we're going to use during it and what could arise. And as a former language lab director, I can tell you that technology will always throw you some new angle that may not be a problem, but that you have to sort of move around. And so trying to imagine those complications, making sure that you have everything set up before you start the task, which could be weeks long, before you start the task is incredibly important. And finally, the product. Students have worked really hard on this, and part of the motivation of using technology is that they have an actual product at the end, and we're going to see some of those in just a minute. So is that final product pedagogically appropriate? Does it motivate and interest the students? And are those expectations made incredibly clear from the very beginning? So that's part of, again, that planning process that you've already established those expectations before you even introduce it into the class. And then alignment. So how exactly does the use of the technology align with my year plan, my unit plan, or my lesson plans, or that of other subjects in the school? So you can see here that this is not just a situation where we see something cool on the web and we're going to go take it into the classroom the next day. This is a process that takes a lot of back planning in order to implement it effectively in the classroom. And when we talk about, one more word before we talk about one computer classrooms, when we mention DATU, we have to think about what are the technology learning standards on the national, state, and district levels. And in your homework, you explored some of that with the NETs. And that's really important to keep in mind, because not only does it help guide you on what students can and should be able to do, but it also helps you to remember that they do need to be doing this as much as possible in classrooms. But then we do face the reality that maybe we don't have beautiful classrooms with as many laptops or iPads as we need, and maybe there's only one computer if you're lucky. So what do we do in that case? What do you do if you don't have any technology? What do you do if you don't even have one computer? In that case, you have to sort of turn to your own resources and planning beforehand, like I said, to sort of bring images from the web. If you have a color printer, bring images from the web, bringing things that they could color in their space, printing out worksheets that they could help them to create dialogues that have blanks where they could create personalized dialogues, things like that, where you could use your personal technology to enhance your learning. But let's say that, like a lot of classrooms, you only have one computer. You can download copies from that computer and print them for individual handouts or transparencies. A lot of times in a classroom, your only mode of transportation will be an overhead projector. And so, but you could use those to make transparencies. Consider your internet connections. If you don't have internet connection on site, in a lot of schools, because of safety reasons, will have a passcode that can only be used for certain things. They'll have a lot of sites blocked. You're going to need to use a USB or flash drive if you're not going to be able to access a certain website on site in your classroom. Or if it's not projected onto the board, how are you going to present it to students? What other available technology does your classroom or your school have? I worked in a school that had a portable smartboard. So that's something that you have to plan ahead to reserve, but then again, it's a really wonderful resource. A lot of schools have smart carts where there's a laptop and a portable projector on a cart that you can then reserve as well. You can also use this in learning station times, depending on how old the students are. This works best about 3rd grade and under. So that's one station within multiple learning station times And so what you would have to do there, though, is then rotate what students are getting to. You really have to monitor what students are getting to use it, because in most learning stations, 3 or 4 students can work on something at a time. So either they're doing a group work activity on the computer, or you're having to make sure that you have enough learning station time to see that every student gets that single student time. And then another way to really make sure that this is important to them is to use the computer lab and then come back and use that one computer to show their collaboration. And that's a way of showing off, to show off their product that they've done in the target language. One very popular way that we can use the internet are web quests. And this is basically just a way to focus our internet attention for our students. So they're not just aimlessly searching the web. It's not just a I'm feeling lucky Google search, right? They can access these foreign language rich materials on the web with your help. And we guide them to see what's really important here. So we're structuring the activity. We're giving them that really strong structure through these following steps so that they can see what is really important to learn. So the first thing you want to do, and this is really true for everything that we do with technology, we want to set it up. We want to give them really strong structuring throughout the activity, and then we want to give them a very strong conclusion and presentation style. So the first thing is that introduction. We want to establish those background schemata, that cognitive schemata that we talked about before. We want to establish that background knowledge and really engage the learner. Why is this important? How is it going to be fun? And then with the task, we want to establish clear expectations of what we want them to do and what their final product is going to be. Because a lot of times a video like the one you saw in your homework is an excellent way to motivate students to say, look at this. Then we're going to give them rich descriptions, a very clear description of all of the steps and outcomes for each part of the task. And so a lot of times if your students can read, or if you have good parent participation, those can be written out, and you're going to have to revise and add to them as you use these tasks every year, but you'll find out what works and what doesn't. Your resources. What outside resources do you have that are developmentally appropriate and accessible for the students? You want to direct the experience. Again, we don't just want them searching aimlessly on the web. We want to direct that experience to have students learn. So some of them might not be text-based. Maybe you want them to interview someone in their house and then find words and make a word cloud while they're working in the text station one day during the week. So you're using both direct experiences and technology to create a product that they can then show. You also want to have planned out beforehand all of your evaluations and assessments. You want to establish all of your rubrics and benchmarks before beginning the task. But you also have to continually monitor and review student progress and evaluation methods as you go, because no one is ever perfect, and so it takes a lot of revision. And the first time you roll out a task, you might have to go back and revise a little bit, and it's important to be clear with the students and the parents more so if the students are younger, about what your expectations are. And then conclusion. You want to give students a clear product for their work. Let them show it off. Give them time and space to reflect on it and how it was important to them, because that's really what's going to draw in their interest and engage them and motivate them. So one of the biggest topics since the 1960s has been video lessons. And what does that actually mean? There are several different ways that we can conceptualize video lessons. First of all, you can video your lessons, your teaching for self-evaluation. So that's a wonderful tool to help you build your portfolio. And as you become teachers and move into the school systems, a lot of times you're going to have to do that and have those videos ready. It also helps you to develop the video editing techniques that then can become very, very simple for you to use with your students. You can also create videos for specific review topics. So let's say you're teaching older kids, maybe you're teaching in an online academy. You can create very specific review topic videos, just as I would do for my online classes, just like this one maybe, that can review one specific thing that students can go to and access, or parents could go to and access and say, oh, okay, now I understand how to help my children go through their homework if they have the resources available. And the program that I use to do these kinds of videos is called Camtasia. Jing is the same thing. It's free, whereas Camtasia isn't, but Jing only allows you to video 5 minutes worth of your screen, but you can use those things, and you can find a lot of free resources on the web that can give you a video of your computer screen and your voice, and also your webcam if you would like. Now, if we flip it the other way as a curriculum, so it's based on a book and we're using it as a curriculum. And one excellent example of that can be found on PBS. If you look on PBS, they have really wonderful video curriculum for French and Spanish. Now, they're kind of outdated, but you can see how they're really trying to use the video and other resources to bring in that language and get that target language input. So it's really important to review the pros and cons. If we can look on pages 419 and 420, what are the pros and cons of doing that? As far as pros, it's very cost effective. It helps you schedule your lessons. If you have a context that's there in a video that's sequentially presented with a curriculum, then that really gives you a great context. If you're absent for some reason, it's really easy for a substitute to use a video. It really appeals to the students. It gets their attention. It's something different, and it gives them something to hang on to throughout the entire lesson, so then you don't just have a string of disconnected lessons there. But as far as cons, you have to have the technology to present it. If you overuse it, it's going to be boring. If you don't engage them, they're going to become passive watchers of the video, and then the language is just going in one ear and out the other. You also have to really be able to have some feedback and reinforcement, really, again, get those learners engaged. So if you don't have a dedicated foreign language teacher in the school or the community, then that's going to be something that's really hard for the students to truly acquire the language. And then also, one really big thing there is if you're not carefully monitoring and engaging the students with the video, and then using it to present the grammar and vocabulary, then you have no control over what they are getting from that. Some other things to think about, and these all are tied up in all those questions, those pros and cons. Can it be used as a supplement? Very well, yes, if you do it correctly and if you plan it out and think through the pre, during, and after viewing activities that we're about to talk about. Is it engaging? Is it developmentally appropriate? Does it use the foreign language in appropriate ways? And that is tied to the previous question. And how is the video produced? Do you have the needed resources to show it in the classroom? Are they reliable enough that you can start using the video and then not have to stop it in the middle of the school year? So what does make a good video? Extensive and authentic use of the target language. So those are two really important things. So it's not mostly English and a few French or Spanish or German words thrown in. It's mostly in the target language, just like our lesson should be, but it makes good use of visuals so that students get the little bits that they need. They're not going to understand everything, but they get the little bits that they need for the lesson, such as colors, the color yellow and green. We've got it. And it's also authentic, so it's not just someone standing up there and holding a picture of a square and saying the word square over and over. It's actually an authentic situation where the target language is used. Is pronunciation clear? Does it have engaging music, art, characters? The characters is the biggest thing. Are the characters, are they people that students can identify with or find funny or intriguing or complex? If they can find the characters engaging, then they can get engaged in the story and the context and learn the language from it. The repetition goes back to the pronunciation and the use of the target language. If we are having extensive use of the target language to talk about a certain few topics, then repetition in different ways helps them to see those topics. Humor. This goes back to getting them engaged, and that's more and more important, and we know that different ages have different senses of humor. So more physical sense of humor is going to be more important for younger students, but we can go back and look at the developmental stages of learners in the first part of our book that we reviewed the other week and really see how a student's sense of humor changes over the years. Before you start implementing it, does it have a clear connection to national or state standards? So how can you justify using this? Even if it's over a whole year, could you sit down and say, this is my justification for using this video? And does it have developmentally appropriate points of view? So if you're showing it to a kindergartner, you're going to want them to see very different things than an 8th grader. So just like everything else, when we show a video in class, we have to do something very important. The first step is previewing before we even start with actually the real activities with the video. It's incredibly important to do previewing. Some of those have to do with you, establishing a defined plan for the implementation and activities before you ever start showing the video in class. Having a very defined unit plan or semester or year-long plan. Notifying parents of any significant video usage. A lot of you probably have had to take home confirmations that needed to be signed by your parents that you could view a video in class, things like that. And then once you get in the class, we want to, before we even watch the video, we want to activate that background knowledge to let them know what the video is going to be about. We want to maybe choose specific segments to show to engage students. Excuse me, my throat is dry. We want to maybe show the video silently and ask questions about context. We can learn a lot and gather a lot of background knowledge, gathering that knowledge just by seeing the images. We also want to introduce the notion of advanced organizers. And what advanced organizers do is they give students a concrete, very short activity that makes sure that they know what to listen or look for. So maybe before you show a video about types of clothing, where people in the video are discussing clothing, you might give them a little sheet of paper that says, what is this, and have pictures of different types, different pieces of clothing. And can you remember the word in Spanish for this type of clothing? And it may not count for anything, but it helps them to think, okay, this video is going to be about clothing. So we're doing this advanced organizing in our head, in our California closet of our mind. We also want to make sure that all students can see and hear the video. You're going to have to consider any accommodations that are needed in your classroom and make sure that you've accounted for them. And usually you're going to want to keep some lights on, and that's especially important as you get into the middle school ages when students are more tired. So all of that is beforehand, and then you start during the actual video viewing activities. You might want to do it over several days. Even if it's a 10-minute video, you might want to break it up into different pieces over several days, or you might want to take it and show it multiple times over several different days. You always want to pause the video frequently to check comprehension and ask them simple questions. Who is this? What color shirt does he have on? Is he funny? Things like that. You want to emphasize those important points that you are trying to get from them, because again, they're not going to understand everything, but you want to make sure that they get what you are trying to target. Then once you've asked those questions about the video, follow it up with a personal question. What color shirt is he wearing? Yellow. Do you like the color yellow? And those kinds of things can really help to connect the student to the video. We also want to use visual clues in classroom activities. Your book does a great job of describing those, having students go up, point to things in the video if you pause it, having them predict, compare, contrast. All of those are knowledge skills that they need to be working on at any level. So we can use these videos to help us with our language skills, but also those as well. and then carefully plan for about how much time students can view a video each day. We want to avoid what we call cognitive overload, which is too much information, and so the brain just shuts off. So if you're talking about P through 8 students, we can only do about 2 to 8 minutes, maybe 10 if they're in 8th grade, of complex video activity, because it really is complex. Even if you're pausing it and explaining everything and having them work through everything with you, that's very complex for them. So ideally, they could only digest about that much. At the university level, if it gives you any idea, they could really only do about 15 minutes of that kind of really complex viewing activity. And then our third step is after viewing. So after that, we have to take it and we have to say, okay, well, what was our purpose in showing this video? I didn't just want to turn off the lights and take a nap while you guys were watching this video. We want to give them time for reflection and to personalize conclusions, and that may happen in different ways depending on the kind of video that you're showing or the age group. So reflecting might be circle time in a kindergarten class, or it might be journaling time in an 8th grade class. But giving them time to think about what they've seen and making it personal for them. And we want to then use the themes and characters from the video to introduce those basic concepts of grammar and vocabulary, because that gives them that contextual knowledge, and it makes it make sense to them, because now it's not just some random grammar topic, it's, oh, they used this to do this, to say this in the film that I know the storyline of. So that's really important to do. For example, in my French classes, we watch movies, and then we'll see some PowerPoints where we will pull the characters from the movies into the PowerPoints to talk about different grammar topics. And you have to remember that all students may react differently, and you have to really work that in order to explore ideas with the target language in an appropriate way. So you've got to continue those references and connections throughout activities and assessments in the class. And so that's part of that planning process that you started way beforehand. You started all of that way beforehand so that you know how it's going to play out through the entire period of learning that you're going to use this video with. One thing that is very important to talk about now as far as the 21st century skills and the STEM initiatives is Web 2.0. And that's a buzzword that we might hear a lot, but we just need to clarify what that means. Web 2.0 are internet applications that allow users to create. So for example, Web 1.0, as they say in the book, might be just reading the New York Times website to get news. Web 2.0 would be writing or publishing a blog post. So now you've created something and you've put it on the web. Developing a wiki, using course management systems like BlazeView, using Facebook, Twitter. All of those are Web 2.0 things that we do every day, but we don't really realize it. So we become active managers of information and not passive receivers of information. And students that are starting out in P through 8, they have lived in Web 2.0. They're really not used to Web 1.0. Of course, they're used to reading websites, but they're going to go do something with that information. So we really have to remember that they have lived in a world where Web 2.0 has always been there. We really have to then, again, be careful about security guidelines. Research has shown that when things are public on the web, students' interest and motivation skyrockets. But then we also have to think about the fact that we are dealing with younger learners and consider those safety considerations. A lot of these applications, though, have an EDU site that adjusts security settings. So, for example, there's a site that's similar to Facebook called Edmodo, but it's made for classrooms. So it's very secure, and most school districts either have a license with it or will agree to buy a license. And that's one other thing. Sometimes with Web 2.0 applications, you can get a free trial or a free usage of it, but it may not have all the very cool, interesting things or the connections that you might get if you could pay for a license. And so you might want to pay out of pocket for some of these things, or you might want to talk to your principal or a district manager or something like that, or other teachers, and go in together and get a discounted version for your school. And they often offer those. So that's always something to check into. So some examples of Web 2.0. This is an excellent site that has all of these Web 2.0 tools for you to use, and they are divided up by different types of skills, which is excellent for us as language teachers. Presentation, interpersonal, things like that. So that's wonderful to sort of explore, click on, see what you can use, and again, use those free trials to kind of see what they're about, and then you can say, okay, well, maybe I want to go ask for some money to buy the school license for this, and other teachers might want to use it. Some examples of some things that I've done in my classes, and some of you that have been in my class will recognize these. Some process writing assignments. So let's say we want students to do a rough draft, have it edited by the teacher, and then revise it, but then pull in things around the web to really demonstrate what they're learning and what they're saying. Glogster does that for us excellently. So you can see here that I've got compositions from my students where they designed these posters, and it was basically drag and drop. They didn't have to do any code writing or anything like that, but they were able to put in their wording that they developed from their compositions. It takes a minute to load. But they were able to create links, put in their own pictures, and caption them. And another great thing about Web 2.0 is then you can create a conversation. So with older learners, those in middle school, that's really interesting to them because it's a lot like Facebook. Some other things, if we want to bring in speaking, VoiceThread is an excellent tool. Here you can see that this student has brought in
Les beaux tirons poussent maintenant juste à l'extérieur de la ville de Paris.
Has brought in text that he's written, and if we were to watch it, you would see that it would pop up here. And then he has different pictures of what he's talking about. So he's basically created a narrated slideshow. But the biggest thing here is that, again, students can also comment on it. So you create a conversation between your students. And so again, he's created this. It's out there on the web, but you're also drawing in all the students to make a conversation. Another great thing for writing practice, and these are things that you can just find on the web. This is a great website, Free Technology for Teachers. Blogging for students. We do that in French 1001. Animation for kids, so you can see that he has all of these resources here. But blogging really helps students with more immediate writing. So rather than that process writing, what students are doing is really acting immediately with their writing rather than doing the editing and back and forth with the teacher, and that allows them to really just experiment. Word clouds are great because if you can bring them into the classroom, it allows students to really see how the words that they're using. This is a great one, English notebook cover. Oh, we can't see it right away using Chrome. But you can see that that creates these words, and it sees why would students be writing roar, laugh, wish, climb on their notebooks. So words that are important to students can then create clouds. If we want to do what we call asynchronous posting of information. So synchronous would be where you're in a discussion group online and we can talk to each other like on Skype. Asynchronous is more like what we are doing here, where I'm posting something and then you would respond to it. So an asynchronous posting of information would be something like a discussion board like that. But this is a great one for elementary school students, primary wall. And you can adjust it. This one would be more for something like 4th or 5th grade, but you could adjust it to activities, different ways to make 20. Write down different animals even, things like that. So if you or your students have the resources to do this, then this is an excellent way to get them engaged with learning how to function with a computer, typing, things like that, getting used to being around computers, and also creating a product. And then this is one that I found that students of all ages love. This is one example of an animated video, and this is an example from a university classroom. But what students would do is select a character in a space, and they have all different kinds, giraffes, things like that. And they would then have to create the text. So it can be as simple as bonjour or hola, and then say something else, some very simple little sentences, and you could do it together as a class if you're younger learners, or you could have older learners work in groups. So I had to type in the text for this, and then the character automatically says it.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Sophie. Je vais à Paris. Qu'est-ce que je vais faire? J'ai faim, je vais au café. Je vais manger un petit gâteau. Miam miam. Je vais.
So here in this lesson we were learning about the verb aller, to go. So I repeated that over and over and over. And then we were also learning about food vocabulary. So obviously she's in a cafe. That was the scenario that I chose. So how you implement that for your learners depends on your curriculum, how old they are. Again, maybe you just want to do some simple exchanges back and forth between two elephants in a forest, or maybe you want to have students work in groups of 3 or 4 to really create a scenario. So those are some examples, and like I said, what I've tried to do here is give you some big websites where you can go and really explore the resources, and then also some websites where you could maybe take that and look for other things. If you don't like that specific one, you could take that and look for other things that might address your teaching goals. So connecting with other disciplines is also a really great thing that technology does for us. So if you don't have a whole lot of technology in the classroom, what can you find that you can do? So here's something that we can laugh at as we watch it, but again, and I chose it in English because we have different languages in our classroom, but if you look at what the people in the film are using, there are things that you would find in any elementary school classroom, or you could borrow easily from another classroom. There's a reason why they call this classroom instruments. You see here, this instrument here. That's something that we could use easily in any classroom. If we chose a foreign language song, you can have students practice it. Practice those parts that you're really trying to connect with, whatever the subject matter is. If it's a verb that you're studying, or if it's a vocabulary word or group of vocabulary words, really practice it over and over. And then once you have that, you can help them to practice with the music teacher, or borrow some things from the music teacher or other classroom teachers, and then use your iPhone to record it or something like that. And even if you can only show it to the students and then immediately delete it and prove to the principal that you've immediately deleted it, when they see themselves on the video, as long as that's okay for all of the students to be recorded, you've accounted for all of that, that gives them a product. So they've practiced that song really hard, they've used instruments to perform it, and then they can see themselves doing it. And so if you have a little bit more relaxed environment, maybe you can share that with the parents. There are a lot of elementary school teachers who are using Twitter, as we talked about the other night, to give parents updates. So that's something that you could post as password protected on YouTube, then let the parents know what the password is, and the parents can see their students performing, and the students can show it to their parents. And that's something that's very rewarding for them. Also, the example using art and music from the homework that you did is a wonderful thing, where students were doing a great song because they had a lot of repetition, And so over the river and through the woods, over and over and over, they're saying this. And you can see that the students are practicing writing their names, they're practicing writing the words, and they're illustrating what they're doing. So they're getting the words and the visuals. The music is in the background. And then what she's done is she's created this video just by taking pictures of the songs and using something like this Camtasia product that I have here to make a video of their song. And so that's something where none of the students are identifiable, but they can see that product. We just have to keep our mind open, and then maybe in that way you're incorporating the art and the music, and you can do a multidisciplinary project. So these things give opportunities for motor skill definition, so dancing, movement, fun, that wiggling that needs to happen, practice with other subjects, extended practice with pronunciation of foreign language words or lyrics or rhymes. And then when you film them and share them, even if, again, only the students see it once and then it's gone, you get that sense of accomplishment. So those are some thoughts about using technology with younger foreign language learners. And we're going to explore a little bit in our class this coming Thursday about some things that we could do. What Web 2.0 tools are appealing to you? We're going to look at some, and maybe you'll find some that are appealing to you. And then you can think about, okay, is it appropriate for usage in the classroom? So those are the two different sides of the thing that you have to look at.